Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. I've got some good news and some weird news. The good news is I think we have a really good show planned for today. Now, I know I say that every day, and yet today I feel especially good about the content we're going to present. Our buddy Michael Carvel, who works with us, he's one of our producers on our program, shared with me some audio this morning that I had not heard before. And I think this is actually pretty good. It's Kirby Smart talking about the Notre Dame game, and Kirby in particular says something really funny about the upcoming Notre Dame game. I'm going to share that with you coming up on today's program. We have a really fun special guest today. CBS Sports' Brad Nessler is going to be with us in just a couple of minutes. Obviously, the big news yesterday was the announcement that Notre Dame is going to be an 8 p.m. start on CBS on September 21st. It actually happened live during our live broadcast window yesterday, so we're going to talk to him about that. I just think this is an exciting time, certainly for UGA, but I think for CBS as well. This is a cool game for them to have on, and obviously I'm sure Brad's super excited about that, so we're going to talk to him about this coming up in a couple of minutes. I've heard from you on what is going to be a very hot-button issue involving that game. We'll address that over the course of today's program, so I think I'm going to make good on my word here that our program is indeed going to be a good one today. However, here's the weird news. From time to time we do this. We're going to do this today. We're going to go a little bit out of order. Now, some of you kind of pop in and pop out. You don't really care what order we do anything in. But for those of you who watch the full show every single day, you're kind of used to a certain format. We're going to take that format almost like, you ever seen the movie Pulp Fiction where things going to happen out of order? We're going to do some stuff kind of out of order today, just a little bit. And then if later on you want to listen to the radio show on 960 The Ref or the podcast at various podcast channels, you can hear us put it all right back together in the format that you're used to. I'm going to make things a little hard on our other producer, Connor Riley, on that front today. But nonetheless, we're going to have a really good show. So why don't we do this? We're probably about 5 or 6 minutes away from our buddy Brad Nessler joining us and being a part of the program here today on DawgNation Daily. Before that happens, I'll save my talking and stuff for later on. Let me let you instead kind of pop in here and give some of your thoughts about what's going to go on. A shocking breach of protocol for us to take comments this early in the program, but we are going to do that today nonetheless. And I'm guessing there's still a lot to be said about the Notre Dame game and kind of the excitement therein. I'm guessing a lot of you still want to talk about that a good bit. I'm guessing there's just this overall sense of anticipation at the start of the rest of the season as well, and no doubt that's going to be a big topic of conversation. John Arena checks in on Facebook to say that he's on I-20 eastbound heading towards Augusta. Go Dogs. John, thank you so much for checking in. Let me also advise you, hands at 10-2 here. We're glad to have you participating in the program, but be careful driving on the road there. I think I'm contractually obligated to say that. Nager Yang says that he plans on being at the Notre Dame game. And, you know, for those of you still trying to scramble and fight your way in there, I hope it all works out for all of you. I know some of you who've been longtime season ticket holders, you're really excited about seeing that come in the mail, because I don't believe season tickets will have come in the mail yet. I doubt they've even been printed as of yet. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't believe that's probably happened. So I'm sure you're excited about getting that package in the mail when it does come. And for those of you still trying to figure all that out, right now, the tickets are expensive. I'm not Clark Howard. I won't even pretend to be. And yet, at the same time, it seems like to me that it's more likely the tickets go down in price a little bit by the time the game gets here, as opposed to going up in price. I mean, how much more expensive could they get? I think the secondary market value right now has them at somewhere in the neighborhood of, what, $500 to $700, something like that. Y'all, I've been going to Georgia games for a long time. I don't remember ever a get-in price for a Georgia game being that high. My assumption is the market will correct itself over time, but listen, I understand the risk that you take if you wait to get them, because they obviously could go up even more. What else is going on here? Mike Anderson says he's going to be in a sports bar for the Georgia Notre Dame game, and for many of you, it will be that thing of, hey, you know, given the choice of spending $1,000 on a pair of tickets or going and watching with some friends, either in a really cool living room or a basement or a really fun bar, obviously a lot of people are going to make that choice, and I don't think that you're going to have a bad time doing that. I think anywhere where Georgia fans are congregated is going to end up being a really fun thing, and ultimately that's what this is all about. We talk about this from time to time on a number of fronts, that it's ultimately the people you watch the game with that makes your experience. And I guarantee you, we have this debate from time to time of, you know, those who like being at the stadium and those who like being in living rooms or basements or somewhere like that, or, as you said, sports bars. Ultimately, what you're really saying is, I enjoy the people that I'm with in this venue, because it's not actually the place you watch it that makes the fun. It's the people you watch it with. I do firmly believe that. Chris Pope says, what channel will it be on? Chris, I'm glad you asked. It will be on CBS. Big-time piece of TV real estate for Georgia on that one. And the guy calling the game, Brad Nessler, is going to be with us here in just a couple of minutes. James Crump on the subject of Kendall Milton. And, yeah, we are getting close to July 29th, aren't we? Seems like it's kind of gone quiet on that western front, and I do mean that literally, given the fact that Milton is in California. He's kind of gone a little bit radio silent heading towards his commitment decision, but it is on its way. Ray June Johnson says, going to be in my brand new house with our brand new leather sofa, plenty of beer, bathroom close by. Ray, you're going to talk it up like that, you're going to have to start inviting some of us to come over. That sounds like a pretty good time. Christopher Moore checking in from Conyers, Georgia. Appreciate that. Glad to have you here. Rick Joyner says good morning. Joel Moody says Dogs by double digits over the Irish, probably 17 or more points. And, yeah, this is something I've talked about a few times, and I think I may hit this again here coming up pretty soon. I may even write about this, believe it or not. I think anything less than a blowout in this game will be a disappointment. I think that Georgia's got a chance to send a pretty strong message. We've all heard back at SEC Media Days the notion of do more. Well, I think an element of do more for Georgia this season could also potentially include getting something that it didn't have the opportunity to get last year, which was a high-profile non-conference win. You know, last year you had people criticizing the Georgia non-conference schedule, saying they better be undefeated because with this non-conference schedule, there are going to be some tough questions asked about Georgia. Ultimately, that turned out to just be hot air. Had Georgia won the SEC, would have had no problem making the college football playoff. But this year, the schedule provides something that last year's schedule didn't provide. So along the lines of the do more philosophy, part of that can be adding a big-time, high-profile non-conference win. And it's not just a resume patter. It's also the symbolic value of beating a team that was in the playoff a year ago, a team that most Georgia fans don't think belongs in the same field with the Dogs, and a team that has the extra value of being historically one of the best in all of college football. So I kind of agree with the commenter on that. There's a real opportunity here for Georgia to do something bigger than just get a win. I don't mind telling you, speaking from the perspective of a fan for a moment, I'll be disappointed if it's less than that. I won't be mad if Georgia wins the game, even if it's close. But in terms of what the opportunity could be for Georgia, in terms of the message that it could send, yeah, I guess I'll be a little disappointed if it doesn't work out the other way. I think I probably will. Colby Curry says, BA, just know that I'm skipping watching the Mueller testimony for the show. That's dedication. Go Dogs. Well, Colby, I'm really glad to have you with us, and I won't have to be sworn under oath here to tell you the truth about Georgia football today. I'll be glad to do that nonetheless. And I know many of you, when we do the show during the day, during this time, a lot of you have different things going on, whether it be other news that might be breaking in your own work life. So we appreciate you sharing some time with our program. We'll try to make good use of your time here today on DawgNation Daily, including right now with a chance to talk to the guy who'll call the Georgia-Notre Dame game coming up in September. Let's say hello to CBS Sports' Brad Nessler. And, boy, I tell you what, around DawgNation, there is a huge level of excitement for what's going to happen on September 21st. We already had a suspicion that it might be a night game. CBS confirmed that yesterday, and the news has been just incredibly received by all kinds of Georgia fans, and I'm presuming Notre Dame fans on this as well. The guy that will call that game, along with Gary Danielson on CBS Sports, is Brad Nessler. He joins us back here at DawgNation Daily once again. Brad, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being a part of our program.
Always good to be with you, Brandon. We're looking forward to the 21st, too, and I know it 2 years ago it was sort of Georgia Bulldog Nation North at Notre Dame. I don't know if it's going to be that way when they come to Athens. I don't think a lot of Dog fans are going to want to give up their tickets for that game that night.
No, I think you're probably right about that. I don't think Georgia fans are going to be quite as willing to part with theirs, even though the secondary market has the tickets really high on that. And I guess I was kind of curious about your perspective coming from the CBS side on this. For Georgia fans, this is a really big deal. From the CBS standpoint of the fact that it's such a unique non-conference game. Notre Dame's not been to Athens before. Until recently, Georgia just didn't really play these kinds of games all that much. How much do you think the idea of the uniqueness of this resonates nationally? You're obviously broadcasting this to all 50 states. Do you think the country gets what a cool deal this is for the fans that are involved in this game?
Yeah, I really do. We looked at the schedule, and when we saw it was home and home from 2 years ago, and looked ahead and saw that it was, had a capability of being a primetime game that we would have, we were pretty excited about it. And Gary and I, and our programming department, everybody looking ahead to it. It wasn't a big secret to me. I opened my yap at the SEC Media Days about 20 different times last week that we were having that game. And then we went out to dinner with the commissioner, and Dan Weinberg, our programming director guy at CBS, said, yeah, well, we're probably going to announce it sometime this week. And I said, well, I've announced it about 50 times to my friends already. So I guess I let the cat out of the bag to a lot of the folks that I might have said something to actually months ago. I apologize to my employers for opening up. But, you know, we looked at that and said we knew that we probably had to make some concessions. And in the case of Alabama and LSU, that was what was going to have to go away from being a nighttime game. And so, you know, we had to do a swap there. We knew that. Going in, I guess we weren't 100% confirmed until yesterday, but LSU and Alabama is going to be a 3:30 game. I can tell everybody that right now, too, instead of a night game. But we think that's just too great an opportunity, two major marquee programs from, you know, different parts of the country that, you know, Notre Dame's never been to Athens. You go back, the national championship game in '80. We'll have a lot of flashbacks to that, and flashbacks from 2 years ago because it was a great game. It was Jake's first start. You know, it came down to the last minute and a half, a strip sack, or it might have ended up being a different story. And you know, that really got Georgia on their way to the great season they had. So, and I think it also kind of shocked Notre Dame into having as good a year as they had last year. You know, going undefeated in the regular season. So that all kind of set things up, and I don't know if those teams will be as good as the teams of those 2 years, but I think everybody thinks so right now.
You know, you said something kind of interesting, and I was, I guess, kind of curious where you would come down on this. You've obviously done a lot of big games over the years, and it sounds like you're also a little extra excited for this game because it is a night game. I can tell you from the perspective of fans, myself and the people that I talk to every single day, the game is made bigger because it will be dark. There's just something cool about a night game in the SEC, and it sounds like you think the TV product is also slightly made better by the primetime window. That's a unique environment for CBS. Most of the games y'all do are obviously 3:30. You've had, as you said before, LSU, Alabama in that spot now for a number of years. It sounds like there's also a little bit of extra excitement in the broadcast booth to be able to call this game under the lights as well.
No doubt about it. And, you know, we don't get an opportunity to do Notre Dame very often. And I did when I was at ESPN, but it was only road games. But, you know, those tended to be games that weren't that great, you know, when they were on the road. This is big time. I mean, this has got bowl game feel to it, basically in the third, fourth week of the season, however you want to look at the start of the season. And I think the only thing that would make it better, and I just throw it out there right now because I know Kirby listens to you every day. I think black jerseys would be just perfect for that night, don't you?
I think it'd be a lot of fun. Listen, Brad, you better believe there are a lot of Georgia fans who are already wondering if that might be in the offering. So I think that'd be a lot of fun to think about there, especially just given all the pageantry that already be in place for that. Now, you do realize that that's going to stir people up even more to think about the possibility of putting those jerseys on. Georgia hasn't worn those in a couple years.
Well, I'll tell you one guy that I talked to about it, and I can put it this way, and I don't have to name his name. He happens to be a really good quarterback, and he was at the Manning Passing Academy about 3 weeks ago or a month ago. I was there for a couple days, and I just happened to mention the Notre Dame game, and somebody said, you know, black jerseys would be nice, and I said, well, you better get on that right now with the coach if you really want to get that through. And the aforementioned player said, I might not get another chance to ever wear them. I'm not going to name any names. I'm just saying there's probably some kids on the Georgia team that wouldn't mind doing that too.
A couple more minutes here with Brad Nessler from CBS Sports, and you talked about how the history of the 1980 game and what happened in 2017 will be a part of the story that CBS tells that night. I guess I'm also curious about this, and it may be too early to determine this one way or another. You may remember back in December there were a lot of tweets from Georgia players about their exclusion from the playoff and Notre Dame's inclusion after Notre Dame got beaten up a bit by Clemson. I think most of the Georgia players who tweeted that, frankly, probably regret that now. Even some Georgia fans weren't all that happy with that look. It seemed to some to be kind of sour grapes. But does that add to the spice of this game beyond the pageantry, beyond the history being made by having Notre Dame in Athens, knowing that there's also potentially a little bit of bad blood anytime there's one of these, I guess, inter-regional deals where an SEC team takes on a Midwest team? Does that add to the spice of this, in your opinion?
I think it probably does. Too early to tell. I think there's more problems right now between Clemson and Alabama, talking back and forth. But if Notre Dame was a tougher opponent than somebody else and all that stuff that's going on right now, I don't pay a lot of attention to that. But obviously, that will heat up as we go through fall practice, and everybody's got to win a couple games before we can look at that and say, okay, this is. It's going to be number maybe 3 against number, 12. Who knows? I don't know what the rankings are going to be like. But, I spent some time with Ian Book, too, at the aforementioned camp. And I said, you're going to love Athens at night, man. It's awesome. And he just looked at me and said, I can't wait. I was really impressed with him. He's a good kid and, really smart, accurate. He's got a better arm than I thought he did after watching him throw for a couple of days. So they've got a really good leader. They got a good coach. They got a team that needs a few things. They got their offensive line for the most part back. They got a couple of receivers that caught 50 balls last year. They got to replace their running back, but they'll find a running back. I mean, they're going to be a really good team. I don't think they're going to be 12-1 team, but because they've got to go to Michigan, Stanford, and Georgia. But worry about the losses that could come. I just want them to beat New Mexico and Louisville, so they're undefeated when they come to Georgia.
Let me finish up with this, if you don't mind. You mentioned being at SEC Media Days last week, and I know you saw the chatter that exists around Georgia, and by now this is a very familiar storyline. This is, as you said, almost in everybody's book, going to be the preseason number 3 team in the country, and Georgia, Kirby Smart, the players who were on hand last week, talked openly about their unfinished business, the need to win a national championship, and yet if they were to play Alabama tomorrow on a neutral site field, as you know, Alabama's still a point spread favorite, and there are these missed opportunities versus Alabama the last couple of years. What do you think about that storyline for Georgia, and how do you think Georgia handled the questions surrounding what it still needs to do when it spoke last week at SEC Media Days?
I think they were straight up. Whatever their motto is, do more. They got to do just that much more. And everybody asked me about them getting over the hump. I said they were on top of the hump 2 years in a row. They just fell back off at the wrong direction. When they learn how to get on that hump and then lean forward, they're as good as anybody, and that includes Alabama. But until they beat them, that's just going to be the rhetoric for those two teams for years to come. And everybody expects that they're going to be the two teams that we'll see December 7th in Atlanta again. We got a lot of ball left before then, Brandon, and I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, Brad, I'm going to tell you this right now. When it comes to a really big college football game, which Georgia-Notre Dame is, the one thing all fans want is for the guys in the booth to also be fans, and it's pretty clear that you're a fan of this sport. You love college football. You understand the history that's involved with this game. You understand what it could also mean for Georgia and, frankly, for Notre Dame as well in terms of the present tense of what they want to do this season. We are already at a fever pitch for this. We're really glad to have you personally on the call. Can't wait to welcome CBS back to Athens once again. Thank you so much for being here on DawgNation Daily today, and boy, I'll look forward to seeing you hopefully a bunch around the season this year, because a lot of appearances for Georgia on CBS likely mean some good news for the Dogs.
No, that's good news, Brandon. I'll talk to you before that game, I'm sure, but we'll be ready to rock and roll that night.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for your time, Brad.
You got it, buddy.
Great stuff there from Brad Nessler, and how about him not mincing words whatsoever with the call out for the black jerseys for Georgia Notre Dame. That is, to me, a little unexpected from Nessler there. We'll do more on the black jersey stuff, I think, later on in our program today, but he's flat out saying that Jake Fromm wants to wear them, and I think we even wrote about this a little bit on DawgNation.com last week. Fromm wants to wear the black jerseys. Brad says, we're already there. It's a night game. It's CBS. It's a little bit of a callback to the Georgia-Auburn game in 2007 in the intense atmosphere there. What do you say we go ahead and throw a little more hot sauce on this gumbo, so to speak, and do some black jerseys there too? That is an interesting scenario to think about. And, y'all, I was on the radio this morning in Athens. I was talking to the folks from 960 The Ref about this. I visit with them every Wednesday, and it's just so funny from a college football standpoint. And if you live the world of college football every single day, you understand this completely. And if you don't, this doesn't make any sense at all. We have known for, I reckon, years that the Georgia-Notre Dame game would be September 21st here this upcoming season. That's not news. We have known now for quite some time that CBS had narrowed it down to either 3:30 or 8 p.m. So we only had 2 broadcast windows they could possibly be in. We've known that for a while. In addition to that, it has long been suspected that the game would be at night, so much so that if Nessler says that at SEC Media Days, for the most part, no one has that strong of a reaction to it because that's what's all expected. And yet, even still, when CBS officially says, y'all know that Georgia game that everybody's excited about, that everybody thinks is a really big deal, well, we think it's a really big deal too. And the energy around the game just amps up all that much more. I got to tell you, this is one of the cool days in Sanford Stadium history coming up. And, you hear Kirby Smart talk about this, and he talks about how the fact that the game is made even more important now because it'll take place on Dooley Field. It'll be the first, and apologies to the other opponents that Georgia will have played by then, it'll be the first big game to take place on the soil now known as Dooley Field, and that's poignant just given the fact that it was Vince Dooley himself who went out and got that win against Notre Dame way back in 1980 that led to that consensus national championship, the last one that Georgia's won, and that fuels the fire for the hunger for Georgia to go out and get the next, and much the same way that Notre Dame was a springboard towards that in 1980. I think there is some belief that that this Notre Dame game here this year could also be that springboard for this upcoming season because it obviously gives Georgia that national cachet. And on a day in which, people will be looking to make that comparison of what does Georgia look like compared to an Alabama? What does Georgia look like compared to a Clemson? Because let's not forget, and Brad Nessler a moment ago did kind of touch on this. We had Clemson players last week saying that Notre Dame was the toughest opponent they played all last season. It's not an apples-to-apples comparison because Notre Dame's lost a lot, especially on its defense talent from a year ago. But that's a pretty good, strong statement for Georgia to be able to make of, that opponent last year you said on your way to a national championship that you called your toughest opponent? Well, here's what we were just able to do to them in Athens, Georgia. It's obviously getting pretty greedy, and that's obviously getting certainly putting the cart well before the horse. But that's the opportunity that Georgia still has in front of it, that chance to go out and just make a gigantic statement to the rest of the country. You better believe major eyeballs, the world's going to be watching. That's just going to be a really fun thing to consider. Let me also say one more thing about this before we move on. I was really glad as well to hear Brad Nessler talk about the fact that on the CBS broadcast, they will be cultivating the previous history, both the fact that Georgia made a good showing of itself, especially with its fans traveling there in 2017. It's kind of funny how that's still a pretty big national story. All the Georgia fans who were in the Chicago area, in the South, in South Bend in particular, that particular day, and the 1980 game. If you go back and rewatch the NBC broadcast from September of 2017, I thought NBC in particular did a really good job of cultivating that history. They had Herschel Walker as a part of their opening video package. They had an all-time great from Notre Dame as well, although I don't remember who that was. They had, just a collection of highlights, and I think they, from a video standpoint, did a really good job of telling the story about what that one in 2017 meant. I'm really excited to hear that CBS is already on that footing as well to say this isn't just a really big game between two teams who have playoff aspirations. This also represents something that college football just hasn't seen a whole lot. We didn't have these kinds of non-conference games until recently. Georgia paving the way on that and also welcoming in a pretty big opponent. I got to tell you, I think this is going to be a really, really fun day. And it was a thrill for me here as a part of DawgNation Daily to be able to bring that to you, and I hope you enjoyed that as well. And with that said, we'll kind of get back on our normal schedule here a little bit on DawgNation Daily. For those of you who are just joining us, we kind of went out of order a little bit today. Normally we have a typical format that we follow and kind of all that kind of stuff. Today, we had to do things just a little bit out of order today, so we'll kind of get back on our normal footing. So if you're just joining the program, let me kind of tell you what you have missed, and let me tell you what we've still got coming up here. We just had Brad Nessler on the program. I thought that was a really fun opportunity to talk to him about the Georgia game against Notre Dame. If you missed that, you can either see it on the video later on. You can go back and rewatch the YouTube starting right now if you want to do that. I'd love to have you stick with me live, but you can go back from the beginning and check that out. Throughout the course of our program, we're going to hear from Kirby Smart again, some audio that I had not previously heard of him talking himself about the Notre Dame game. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with something that some of y'all had asked me to respond to, and that's ESPN not exactly giving the Georgia running backs as much love as you might would think. We'll talk about that. The black jersey stuff is going to come up again on the show after Nessler mentioned that right now. I've got a major announcement to make about DawgNation Days of Summer. We've got a lot going on here, So let me get ready to do all of that with you, and that'll start from the top here as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, coming up in just a few minutes, I thought Kirby Smart said something really funny. Now, Kirby Smart, I believe, is kind of an underrated funny guy, to be honest with you. He's a little funnier from time to time than some people might think. I thought he said something semi-funny about the Georgia-Notre Dame game. We will hear that from him coming up in a little bit. Before we do that, though, let's get into a little bit of recruiting news. Now, we'll do a lot more of this afternoon as part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. I'm sure Jeff Sintel will have a lot to say on a number of topics. But there was one recruiting target for Georgia in particular that I've seen get some attention recently, and I want to make sure we highlighted that as a part of our program here today. CBSSports.com has a partnership with 24/7 Sports, and I'm sure you're aware of 24/7. They do some recruiting coverage and whatnot, and Barton Simmons is a national analyst for 24/7 Sports, and he occasionally writes for CBS. And I guess 24/7 has just done their re-rank of some of their prospects, and to be clear here, sometimes this can be confusing. The various recruiting outlets will do their own individual rankings, and then 24/7 comes on top of that with their 24/7 composite. This is not an evaluation of the 24/7 composite. This is an evaluation from 24/7 and its specific scouting from its people. And one of the guys that has really risen in the ranks, climbed the ladder a bit as of late, is a guy you've probably heard Jeff Sintel talk about, he's written about, and that's Noah Sewell, Noah Sewell, I should probably say, the really impressive linebacker from out of the state of Utah. So much so that according to 24/7 and its individual ratings, not its composite ratings, but its individual ratings, Noah Sewell is now a 5-star and is among the fastest, highest risers in the recent 24/7 re-rank. Barton Simmons, writing for CBSSports.com, had some very complimentary things to say of him, including a comparison that kind of stopped me in my tracks. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't mention this in the show at all. But the comparison that Barton uses for Sewell, I thought was pretty wild here. Let me read you a few sentences from CBSSports.com on Noah Sewell, who's now a 5-star, according to 24/7. Barton says, one of the 6 new 5-stars in the latest updates, Noah Sewell, 266-pound inside linebacker, who's as good in space as the guy's 50 pounds lighter. At that frame, Barton says, Sewell has a 35-inch vertical, runs a 4.75 40-yard dash, and plays running back in addition to linebacker for his high school. Now, here's the comparison that I think is pretty outrageous when it comes to Noah Sewell, but based on the film that I've seen myself, not that I'm a scout, but it's pretty apparent on the on the film, this is a unique athletic specimen. So much so that Barton Simmons from CBS Sports says, we've compared him to Devin White. That's the big linebacker last year from LSU, who was a top 10 pick in the most recent NFL draft. But Barton says, in addition to Devin White, he could just as easily be compared to another first-round draft pick if he wanted to change positions. Ed Oliver, one of the more athletic defensive linemen we've seen in college football in quite some time. Barton goes on to say that he's younger brother of an Oregon starter. He's also had brothers playing at Utah and Nevada. He says, but the FCC has a very real chance of landing him. Georgia, Alabama, and LSU among the favorites. So we'll get into the recruiting part of this for Noah Sewell in a moment, a name that you probably familiarized yourself with a good bit lately. But how about this idea that you've got this really big linebacker who really runs? National analyst says this guy could be like LSU's Devin White, or he could be like the former 5-star defensive lineman Ed Oliver, who did big things at Houston, if he wanted to be a part of that position. Now, I will admit, selfishly, I love the idea of Ed Oliver's name coming up on the show because it gives me a chance to do something I didn't think I would ever get to do. Now, for those of you watching on video, you'll get this. Radio podcast, I apologize. I have in my possession here an Ed Oliver bobblehead. The University of Houston sent these out last year to kind of promote him for the Heisman Trophy, and this is Oliver sitting on a horse. I guess, I don't know if this horse is like part of their mascot or whatever, but in addition to Oliver's head bobbing, the horse's head bobs too. So I've had this on my desk. They just mailed these out to all the news outlets a year or so ago, and I didn't think I'd ever get to use the Ed Oliver bobblehead doll here on DawgNation Daily, but I'm going to use that today to say, how cool would it be to one day see a Georgia linebacker riding a horse, getting a Georgia uniform on a bobblehead doll, Apparently, that's the kind of company that national analysts are putting Noah Sewell in right now. And Jeff Sentell talked a lot about Noah a week ago on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. My guess is that topic comes up again here this week as well. And you heard the potential suitors. Obviously, there's the West Coast pull because Sewell is in the state of Utah and because he's had brothers that have kind of been in that world. The SEC teams heavily involved. LSU, Alabama gets mentioned. Barton also mentions Georgia, too. That's old news for us here at DawgNation because we've seen the reporting that Jeff Sentell has done on this, including Jeff catching up with Gabriel Sewell, who is Noah's dad. And Gabriel, Mr. Sewell, did not really mince any kind of words about, being very interested, heavily involved in Georgia. This is what Noah Sewell's dad has said before, but the potential connection between his son and UGA, here is Gabriel Sewell.
He's going to make his decision based on field. And although academics is important to him, it's going to be about the people in the building where those people are taking that program and how well of a ride he's going to go on.
He said he will go top 8. He may go top 5. He wants to announce before the end of his senior year. Is Georgia moving up that board? Are they becoming up there? How would you just rate them without?
No, I think, as of right now, he's only locked in 3 official visits, and Georgia's one of them.
Wow.
So, I've advised him we're not going to use an official visit on someone who's not going to be contending. I don't think that's respectful to the program, to the coaches, and to yourself because it's not a good way to use your time. You could actually be using that time to, looking into something that you're really interested in. So as far as that question, Georgia's pretty up there for him.
So I'm going to be very candid here for a moment. I obviously follow recruiting really closely because of how strongly I believe it impacts what ultimately happens on college football Saturdays. The winning and the losing, for the most part, is determined by the recruiting gains and the recruiting losses that you accumulate over the previous year. So I believe that recruiting is incredibly important to the landscape of college football. And at the same time, I'm not a recruiting reporter. I'm not one of these guys that is at every prospect camp that's evaluating these guys from the sophomore year on. So from that standpoint, there's always going to be an example of a guy who just kind of sneaks up on me over time because I'm not following them every single day. I'm mostly following it from that 10,000-foot viewpoint. Noah Sewell's the perfect example of that. Jeff Sentell was probably talking about Sewell before I was paying much attention. Just to be fair and just to be honest, my attention was on some other linebackers for this 2020 class before I was ever really giving much thought, much attention to Noah Sewell. But what's the line that DiCaprio used in that movie? You once had my curiosity, now you have my attention. That's the kind of deal here with that, where I used to be kind of curious about Noah Sewell. Now he has my full attention. Because a big guy that runs as well as he does, a guy that seems to look as good on film as he does, a guy that national analysts are comparing to a linebacker version of Devin White, a defensive line version of Ed Oliver, all of a sudden, that's the kind of thing that is going to pique my interest. I'm sure piquing yours as well. And all of a sudden, when his dad, Gabriel Sewell, says, we wouldn't be giving an official visit to Georgia if we didn't strongly believe that Georgia was a potential fit for our son, all of a sudden, at that point in time, I'm listening a whole lot more closely to that. Noah Sewell was a good player before I was ever talking about him here on DawgNation Daily. That's a big mistake. This is a fast-rising prospect. He's finally getting the national attention he's probably deserved for a long time. He's certainly getting a lot more attention here on DawgNation Daily than he's gotten in the past. And I think I probably speak on behalf of all Georgia fans that say having Sewell in this 2020 class for the Dogs would be a very good thing. And my guess is, as I said before, Sewell's name will probably come up again today on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Can't wait to see you for that. But before that, though, we got plenty more of this. My name is Brandon Adams, and it's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good to have you with us today, live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're normally on the radio at noon every day on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. They did give me a heads up today. We're going to air an hour later today. So for those of you in the Athens area who listen to that 960 The Ref, we are on at 1 p.m. today. That's a one-day only thing. they've got some special high school football coverage coming up today. So we'll go an hour later on the radio at 1 p.m. today and be back again at noon tomorrow. And, of course, on-demand audio in the podcast, wherever you find it, the Apple Podcast Player, the Google Podcast Player. Many of you just listen to the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. However you access our program, we're really glad to have you a part of that. And as I said before, we'll do Before the Hedges presented by Kroger later on today at 3 p.m. Hope to have you join us for that, too. All right. Let me take a couple of minutes to take care of a little bit of business here because I've got a series of announcements, and I hope I can get all this in. I hope I can kind of cover all these bases for a moment because there is some Kirby Smart stuff I want to do here, too. Let me first of all say this. Y'all know how excited I am about DawgNation Days of Summer coming up next Thursday. That's August 1st at Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa in beautiful Towns County, Georgia. You have seen the video by now, for those of you who watch the show, how great it looks. The golf course is in perfect condition. It's just a fantastic, fantastic resort. North Georgia mountains are awesome this time of year. We can't wait to be there. Now, I've also been telling you that over the course of the next few days, I was going to give you some reasons why DawgNation Days of Summer keeps getting bigger. And I love doing that around here. You know, it's always really fun to just keep, as I like to say, plussing these events, taking them, making them a little bit better, make them a little bit better. Well, I'm happy to say that DawgNation Days of Summer has now gotten even bigger and better because I'm proud to welcome in a special guest up there. How about one of the great legends of the early 80s with the Georgia Bulldogs, and a guy who, by the way, still has a nice little connection to the current team as well. How about Scott Werner there at DawgNation Days of Summer on Thursday, August 1st? I can tell you this right now. Of all the great Georgia players of the past, and Scott was a great player, of all the great Georgia players of the past, I don't know that any of them are a better storyteller than Scott Werner. And I don't know that anyone has, because of his family connection to Charlie Werner, I don't know that anyone has a better sort of feel and grasp for what's going to happen with this current team this upcoming year. So the kind of fun, casual, get ready for the season type conversation that we like having around DawgNation, that just got even more fun and even better with Scott Werner on hand with us next Thursday, August 1st at Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa for DawgNation Days of Summer. That's going to be incredible. Now, let me also make this announcement as well. One of the things that we did at our previous DawgNation Days of Summer event was we had some room in our VIP reception for people who were not staying at the hotel that night. And I guess I've talked to my people, and I guess that we're able to now partition off a couple of spots. We've been asked about this. Hey, you know, we're in the North Georgia area. We don't need to stay, but we do want the VIP experience. I can't get you the personalized gift. It's too late to do that. I can give you a gift. It just won't be personalized. But if you want information about how you can get into the VIP reception, there is a ticket associated with this, and our folks here behind the scenes will tell you more about that. Let me give you an email address to go to. DawgNationHelp@gmail.com. Now, when I tell you, they won't give me much more than like a couple of these. I have a small handful of additional VIP reception tickets available on kind of a first-come, first-served basis for those who reach out at the email address that you see on your screen below, or I'm going to read to you now, DawgNationHelp@gmail.com. It's DawgNationHelp@gmail.com, and you can find out more information about how you can squeeze your way into the VIP reception. The big public reception open to everybody begins at 6 p.m. We have a VIP reception that starts at 5. We've already got a whole host of people that are going to be a part of that. For those of you that are staying overnight, the fun's going to extend well beyond the regular event itself, and we might be able to make room for a couple more, but you got to go to DawgNationHelp@gmail.com if you want to find out more information about that. Now, are we also prepared to announce the winner of our VIP stay giveaway, courtesy of Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa? All right, let's go ahead and do that a bit too here. I am proud to announce, as we throw this up on the screen, I've been telling you now for a while that we were going to have a DawgNation Days of Summer VIP giveaway. We shut off the entries for that earlier this week, and now proud to announce that Brad Morgan is the winner. Brad, you are the winner of the DawgNation Days of Summer VIP giveaway. So we'll look forward to seeing you there at Brasstown. Incredibly fun. Looking forward to that. Can't wait to see you there as a part of DawgNation Days of Summer. That is going to be a ton of fun. All right. I am running just a little bit late, but let me kind of transition here and do our Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. This is going to be, I think, a really fun thing because obviously a lot of what we're talking about here today, including around the Doghouse presented by ESOG, is the build up to the Georgia Notre Dame game. We're going to have Brad Nessler, the great CBS sports broadcaster, on in a minute. He's going to talk about that. The folks at CBS are obviously really excited about all this. The Georgia fans are really excited about all this. Even Kirby Smart himself is certainly paying homage to just how big this game is in the landscape of college football and for Georgia in particular. In fact, let me let you hear a little bit of him talking about the game from the SEC network going back to SEC Media Days. Now, this was recorded off of TV, so it's not perfect audio, but it is a nice chance to hear Kirby Smart saying what he feels like this game means to DawgNation. Here is Kirby on that topic.
Coach, we threw up the schedule there just a minute ago. There's that September 21st game that a lot of people are looking at against Notre Dame. We're not going to ask you to look ahead. Don't worry. I know Vanderbilt's most important early on. But when you think about Georgia fans and the way that they have responded against Notre Dame before, what do you expect, especially knowing that this one's in Athens?
Raucous environment, a night game, and we certainly got a lot of games to get to that point, but I think it'll be a special venue. It's going to be Vince Dooley Field, named by that point,
right,
to get to play Notre Dame, who he had a historic game against. I think it's what you want in the 150th year of college football.
I love that from Kirby Smart. This is a perfect game for the 150th year of college football. The game taking place on Dooley Field makes it even more special. Just a great, great backdrop for the sport that night. I'm looking forward to talking to Brad Nessler from CBS Sports about that just in a moment. Before that, though, let me remind you that Around the Doghouse is brought to you by our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. They are a solutions-based company. That means when it comes to watering your basement or a crack in your foundation, anything like that, if it's a simple fix, they'll tell you exactly how to do it. But if it's a bigger, more problematic situation, you want experts working to help you get that done. Engineered Solutions of Georgia has 2 full-time engineers on staff. So trust the ones that DawgNation would trust. If we had some sort of foundation issue or waterproofing issue, something along those lines, our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. The great news is they are very easy to get in touch with. Simply dial 678-ESOG now. That number, once again, 678-ESOG now. And, of course, it's always great to have Engineered Solutions of Georgia as a part of DawgNation Daily. I hope you enjoy Brad Nessler right now. All right, so for those of you checking in on video a little late here, you may be wondering what in the world is going on. Let me kind of remind you of this kind of one more time, that we went out of order off the top of the program today. We actually already recorded the Brad Nessler interview. I thought it was really good. Brad had some interesting things to say about his hopes that Georgia would wear the black jerseys there for that game that night. I think that's really fun to think about. Also, the folks at CBS are just really, really excited about the upcoming game on September 21st being a night game. That's really fun to hear. So you can go back and hear that from the beginning of our video or later on podcast or radio for those of you, however you might otherwise check in on DawgNation Daily. You can hear that in its entirety when you check in on that a bit later on. I also played one Kirby Smart clip there in terms of his feelings on the Notre Dame game. He actually said something probably even better than that we're going to play coming up in just a moment. I was running just a little bit late right there, so and I mean late from a radio standpoint, so I had to kind of cut that off, but we'll pick that up coming up in just a moment. I'm also really, really excited about the presence of Scott Werner at DawgNation Days of Summer coming up. How much fun is that going to be? What an incredible, incredible event. DawgNation Days of Summer already is. So many of you, we sold out our rooms on this, not sold out, there's still some rooms, but in terms of our allotment for our VIP and everything else, we just burned through those in like 2 seconds. Y'all are clearly excited about this event coming up, and I am too. I mean, I just think it's a great way to start the season. It's going to be an unbelievably fun time. It's going to be a blast. I cannot wait for all that to go down, and welcoming in Scott Werner there makes it even better, even more fun. Just going to be and really an incredible time. So that's really good news. We'll address the black jersey stuff maybe a little bit more there as well later on in our program. We'll have more time for your comments as well. We are just really, really loaded up as a part of a DawgNation Daily today, and we're glad to have you with us. In fact, we'll let the show roll on right now.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Covering a lot of ground here on DawgNation Daily here today. Fun to have Brad Nessler on the program. We'll talk more about what he had to say, I guess, here coming up in just a little bit as well. I also want to address something in just a moment that many of you have asked me to speak on we will do that coming up. First, let me remind you about my friends in Kroger, because now in select Kroger stores, you get 1 hour delivery available. What an amazing world we live in now when Kroger offers 1 hour delivery. You can go to Kroger.com or the Kroger app and begin placing your order today. Kroger's here to obviously help you get some time back during the summer months, and we're heading towards that back-to-school season. Frankly, nobody has enough time. My wife tells me all the time about the challenges of trying to get it all done with kids getting ready to go back to school and soaking that last little bit up in the summer. So Kroger's making it easier for you. And select areas, 1 hour delivery. Just find them online, either Kroger.com or through the Kroger app, and you can get more information about that. And I think that is certainly a really cool thing. All right, so as part of our SEC through, some of you have asked me to discuss this, that ESPN has done its part. It's kind of a like a concerted effort, sort of a group effort here to rank the various running back universities, or as we say around here, RBU, wide receiver U, quarterback U, and everything else. And the thing that's most shocking to the most people is the fact that Georgia got no love in running back U terms. Now, what's even kind of funny about this is I've seen some non-Georgia media also noticing this and kind of asking the question of, how come Georgia doesn't get any attention here? You've got Alabama, who comes at number 1 on this list with Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, Sean Alexander. Wisconsin at number 2 with the thick-ankled guys like Ron Dane, and Melvin Gordon was not thick-ankled, but you can know what the typical Wisconsin running back's kind of like. LSU gets on here with Jacob Hester, Kevin Falk. You can't knock him. He had amazing stats. Leonard Fournette. Oklahoma's on here. Miami's on here. Pitt's on here. Texas, Oregon. They got LeGarrette Blount on here. Didn't LeGarrette Blount get kicked out of college football? How do you have that guy on the list? I thought he got thrown out of the sport for punching a Boise State player. Am I thinking about the right guy on that? I feel like I probably am. Arkansas shows up. Auburn shows up. No top 10 love for Georgia whatsoever. And this is just completely ludicrous. I mean, and I feel like such a hypocrite for saying this, because, as I said to somebody on Twitter this morning, I love lists. I like debating lists. And that's all these things are ultimately supposed to be for. They're just sort of a source of debate. I'm going to make an especially hot take on this. What if Herschel Walker didn't exist? If there was no Herschel Walker? I think you can make a case for Georgia being one of the 10 best running backs programs in the history of college football, even without Herschel Walker, who was, I believe, the greatest player of all time. So let's say there's no Herschel Walker. Let's just say Herschel Walker, just for whatever reason, that it was just a figment of our imagination. That never happened. You've got the Chubb and Michelle tandem. You've got Todd Gurley, who's a better pro than Leonard Fournette is by a long shot. You've got Garrison Hurst, who should have won the 92 Heisman. I don't really know what position Frank Sinkwich is counted as having played. I'm not even really sure what college football in the 1940s was all about. So I won't even go Sinkwich trippy, because I'm not even sure really, what football was even really like back then, the leather helmet days. But nonetheless, you might even mention some of the old timers there in that regard. But you could also mention, Robert Edwards, first-round pick, friend of the program here on DawgNation Daily. Talk about the late 80s stuff with Tim Worley and Ronnie Hampton, the way they were cutting up in college football back then. I feel like Georgia has got firm footing to stand on as one of the 10 greatest schools in terms of producing running backs, even if you don't even mention Herschel Walker is obviously the greatest player of all time. But once you get to the Herschel, I think it's an inexcusable omission to not have Georgia on here. Now, Georgia did get some love from it was linebacker, right? Georgia's the top linebacker program in all of this, so you get a little bit of love there from that. But listen, what do they say about Georgia? Let me see if I can scroll down and find this. So Georgia gets the number 1 linebacker school by mentioning Roquan Smith, Justin Houston, Alec Ogletree, and Georgia fans going to be proud of that. I think Georgia fans, though, would trade that for the running back thing. I think every program kind of has its own accepted branding, and Georgia fans like being a good running back program. If you gave Georgia fans the choice of being its current offense or being the Oklahoma offense, I think the majority of Georgia fans like the offense the way that it is, because it does accentuate the thing that Georgia fans have always liked, which are the running backs in this program. So It's all really weird. I think the Georgia linebackers obviously have had great success, especially when you think about the Buckus Award winner Roquan Smith. But that feels like a little bit of recency bias on the part of the folks from ESPN, especially at the exclusion of the running back thing. I know Connor Riley also wrote about this for DawgNation.com as well. But what a bizarre turn of events there to not see Georgia get that love from ESPN. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, but it is weird, and I at least wanted to talk about that as a part of our program here today. All right, so we've been trying to cover a lot of ground, and one of the things that I attempted to do a little earlier, I did not get a chance to finish. So we were playing some audio earlier of Kirby Smart asked on the SEC Network about the Notre Dame game, and credit to Kirby for not, Laura Rutledge is the first person that asked him the question, and she anticipates that he might try to play the one game at a time. We're only worried about Vanderbilt thing. Credit to him for not really doing that so much. He obviously paid lip service to the fact that you can't really look ahead, but at the same time, we know how big Notre Dame is, and it's a perfect, as he said, landscape or backdrop, maybe it's a better phrase, for the 150th year of college football. We know Kirby believes these things because he's been working really hard to schedule these kinds of games in future years for UGA, so this is very on brand for him. But the follow-up to all this, though, is where I thought Kirby Smart actually got pretty funny. In being asked about, more about what should Notre Dame fans know about coming to Athens, Kirby Smart said something that I think we all deep down believe is probably true. Here's more from Kirby. I think you'll like this.
Anything for Notre Dame fans that they should know about coming to Athens?
I just don't know if our fans will be as nice as theirs were.
I don't
That's
think so
fair to say.
either.
Uncanny ability
That's very
to be
fair to
really
say.
nice. Yeah. And the SEC, we don't always have that.
I think that is so funny because I think that, like a lot of things that are really funny, it's just abundantly true. I mean, I have talked to, I'm no exaggeration, I've probably talked to hundreds of people about, or at least 100 people, maybe not hundreds, at least 100 or so people who were at that Georgia Notre Dame game, and virtually every single one of them say the same thing. They could not believe how nice the Notre Dame fans were. I'm talking about it's like nothing you've ever seen. It's like the entire fan base is Mr. Rogers. I mean, they're shaking your hand. They're introducing themselves. They say, hope y'all have a great time here. Boy, y'all really showed out. Great fan support. Great to see this enthusiasm. They were so nice. And I'm not saying that in a mocking tone. I'm not laughing, making fun, or anything like that. It's just amazing how nice. And so many people in retelling the story about how nice the Notre Dame fans were, it's unbelievable how many said virtually the same thing. Boy, it sure would be nice if our fans were as nice to them when they come here. But deep down, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, it's amazing how many people echoed that identical sentiment. And you essentially have Kirby Smart saying the same thing right there. And listen, I mean, the facts are facts. I love the hospitality that Notre Dame showed. I think you can say there's some things that go on in Georgia right now that may have been somewhat influenced by the Notre Dame hospitality, like the new Silver Dogs, for instance, that welcome people into Sanford Stadium. That's probably an influence that was brought about by the hospitality shown to Georgia at Notre Dame. But ultimately, there's a lot on the line for the Dogs here, and while it's nice to think that some people think of Sanford Stadium as a tourist attraction, certainly Georgia treated Notre Dame Stadium and the Notre Dame campus as a bit of a tourist attraction. Georgia got some business to take care of, so I'm sure the fans will have their game face on in a big way. And the fact that it's a night game, well, that probably only makes that even more true. All right, a couple things as we get ready to wrap up. First of all, my friends at Online Trading Academy, let me tell you about them. Making money in the markets is a great decision to make. Learn from Online Trading Academy in the classroom and online across the spectrum of trading styles, a variety of asset classes. You can find them online yourself by going to tradingacademy.com/Atlanta. That's tradingacademy.com/Atlanta, and you can get in touch with my friends at Online Trading Academy. I got kind of an interesting tweet, I guess, yesterday with the announcement being made for a night game. A lot of Georgia fans kind of already getting in on the spirit of this maybe being a blackout time thing with the black jerseys. I'll give you one example of this from Twitter. @MDog2017 says, not trying to be pushy, however, since Georgia Notre Dame is at 8 p.m. on CBS, UGA should definitely do a blackout game. He says Sanford Stadium would be insane. M-Dog, I wonder how you feel about the fact that Brad Nessler apparently agrees with you on that. By the way, Gator Hater Updater, 998 days. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. and on video. That was a lot to cover in our program today. Hope you all enjoyed that. I apologize for doing the out-of-order deal. Every now and then we do that. Either our schedule gets messed up or we try to accommodate somebody else's schedule. Every now and then we kind of got to go, out of order a bit on all this kind of stuff. So we'll kind of get back to normal here a little bit now and do our R.S. Andrews cool down. By the way, how about the prop being used on the show today? Kind of keeping it hidden, coming out with the Ed Oliver bobblehead. That was kind of a fun thing to be able to do today. I don't know that I'll ever have a reason to use the Ed Oliver bobblehead on the show again, but I was able to do that today. By the way, Connor Raleigh joins us.
So Ed Oliver, the reason he has a horse is because he's a big fan of horses and actually owns a horse of his own now that he is an NFL player.
Is that right? So he was into horses before Old Town Road?
Yes, before Old Town
Wow.
Road. And an even more interesting fact, there was another member of the 2019 NFL draft class that was also very much into horses. That would be Devin
And
White.
his horse just died, right?
I think so.
I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So Noah Sewell, might be time to get Noah Sewell a horse.
I think I've asked you this before. Can a 266-pound person ride a horse?
If Ed Oliver can ride a horse, I think Noah Sewell can.
I feel like, because unfortunately there have been plenty of times in my life, including probably right now, where I tip the scales north of 250. I don't think you're allowed to ride a horse if you weigh more than 250, or you're not supposed to. I think if you ever try to go on a horse riding expedition, I think they have a disclaimer that says you can't ride the horse if you weigh more than 250 pounds, which I'm not going to say I've been turned down for a chance to ride a horse, but maybe there's
But I'd just like to say, you said it would be a good show today. You like what you had. I did not expect you to get off not just one, but two Quentin Tarantino movie references. You made a Pulp Fiction reference.
I did do two of those, yeah.
And you had my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
I did do.
Django Unchained reference.
Yeah, I did do two of those. Some people think I have no pop cultural knowledge whatsoever, but believe it or not, I've actually got cable TV at the house. I've seen a few movies. All right, let me do some of this kind of stuff here for a moment. Tony Burson asked a good question. Let me try to do this. And I got to have my computer over here side saddled today because I've had all kinds of charger issues with this big giant laptop. It will not stay charged. Tony says, BA, what one recruit would you like to see commit this weekend? Let me finish the rest of this from Tony. He says, dad blast it. See this weekend, not name Milton since he's scheduled for Monday. All right, so we won't say that. Here, I'm going to go back and talk more about what Jeff and I talked about yesterday. I don't necessarily need to see a commitment because I do think that a lot of the Georgia momentum for this 2020 class has gone below the surface. So I don't necessarily need to see a commitment, but I'm going to stick to my guns with what I said yesterday. I'd love to see or hear about, and there's a chance I won't hear about this. Maybe Jeff Sintel knows that, there's a chance I won't hear one word about this at all. But I don't want the full weekend to go away without a Rick Gilbert at least stopping by to see UGA. And I would like to think the idea of, since Clemson's only about an hour and a half or so away from Athens, just down 85, I'd love for Jordan Birch to swing by and say hello for a minute too, the 5-star defensive lineman. So I'm going to say that I don't need, from a fan's perspective, for there to be a commitment, but I'd love to see those two guys stop by and have a hot dog or something like that at Georgia for the event that I'm going to call the Cookout.
If I can make a third Quentin Tarantino reference, I'd like to say that's a Ringo. We just say Ringo.
Okay.
I think Ringo would be the one.
You think he's on commitment watch?
I don't think he's on commitment watch, but I'm saying if he were to pop and commit this weekend because he is visiting, I think that'd be pretty exciting.
So here's what I believe about Keeley, and since you're in on this, we'll go ahead and do this. I believe that Keeley Ringo probably knows where he's going to college. I won't pretend to know for a fact. I believe that he probably knows. I believe that Keeley Ringo wants to have the traditional recruitment.
Yep.
I think he wants to name the finalist. I think he wants to do it on TV, his ultimate decision. So I think one way or another, Georgia has either won or lost with Ringo, and the fact that he's coming to Athens this weekend is not a bad sign for Georgia's ultimate win here. So I don't need Ringo to commit this weekend to feel like Georgia's still in a pretty good position for Keeley Ringo. I'd like for it to happen. I don't necessarily need for that to happen to feel good about that. I don't fault Ringo. I mean, listen, I'm kind of an old school guy too. If I was a guy like Ringo, I'd want to have the same kind of commitment ceremonies that people in the past have had on TV with the world watching, or at least the recruiting world watching. I'd want to do that too. So if Ringo wants to hold out for the All-Star game, if he wants to privately tell Charlton Warren and Kirby Smart this week that he's coming, or even if he were to choose another school, I don't necessarily fault him for doing that. The overall point is I don't need him to go public to feel good about that. But I think it's a great question, though, Tony, a really good question. And obviously, Monday can't get here soon enough, because that's going to be, if it's the news that many of us expect it to be, or certainly hope it will be, that is going to be the news there. Dante Rivers says, why did Carson Beck drop so low in the rankings? I didn't know that he did drop in the newest re-rank, but I'm assuming some of this is based on the opening performance. That it's hard to get anybody to give you a straight shot on this, but it sounds like that Beck did not have the world's greatest opening. Now, as I've told Jeff Sintel before, if you look at the overall profile of Beck as a player, he played really, really well last year in 11-on-11 scenarios. Tackle football with state championships on the line. Beck's resume was built in those games. And ultimately, that's where I want you to do well. We've seen examples of guys before who've been 7-on-7 heroes and not necessarily, the same kind of success in 11-on-11. And I don't have to tell you, that doesn't always equal tremendous success in the football field. So I want you to be better in 11-on-11 than I want you to be in 7-on-7. Now, I still see the value in 7-on-7. I think that there's something to being able to make those throws in that environment, especially when it's elite athlete against elite athlete. Can you deliver the football in that situation? I'm not telling you that 7-on-7 doesn't matter at all. I've grown to believe that it probably matters some. I think 11-on-11 matters more. So for now, there probably is a little bit of skepticism about Beck. I don't know that it's founded or not, but there's probably a little bit of skepticism there. And this year, once again, in a situation in Florida high school football where Beck shined last season, he'll get a chance to prove his critics wrong on that. It would not surprise me at all if he did. I mean, one thing we've seen is a lot of reporting on Beck at DawgNation.com, and it certainly seems pretty apparent that he's very committed to his process, learning, growing, getting better. So if there are elements in which he needs to improve, which any quarterback in the stage probably would be that way, my guess is he'll be very devoted to doing that. And I think that that he'll look forward to getting that done this season. So that's kind of my long-winded answer on what's going on with Beck. Probably was not the world's greatest summer for him, and yet the fall, much like last fall was, has a chance to be a lot better.
One thing I will say and bring up when it comes to the Elite 11 and putting stock in how guys perform on these summer camp circuits, if I could take you back to the summer of 2017, there was a quarterback who eventually ended up committing to Georgia who, by all accounts, had probably the best Elite 11 performance of all time, so much so that he became the number one overall player in the country over a guy who had long been tabbed as a generational prospect and was pretty clearly the best player in high school recruit in his class. I'm talking about Justin Fields. And, as good as he played in that 7-on-7 environment, and I trust these guys that there's a reason they saw what they saw there. For whatever reason, when that 7-on-7, and because again, those are all college-bound athletes. Those are elite receivers, elite defensive backs. For whatever reason, when Fields got to Georgia, that sort of drop back and pass sort of environment, he did not display sort of that. He did not look that good doing that. He was at his best when he was moving and running around and creating with his legs. So I do sort of, take some of that 7-on-7 stuff with a grain of salt because, Trevor Lawrence may not have looked as good as Justin Fields in that, particular Elite 11, but I think it's pretty clear just about everyone in the country, including Ohio State fans right now, would take Trevor Lawrence over Justin Fields as a quarterback prospect.
By the way, on a different subject, Amos Williams says I was being a Debbie Downer about Carson Beck. I'm the one that said he was going to vanquish his critics. Y'all don't put spin on my stuff. I'm the one that talked him up a second ago. All right, so what else is going on over here on YouTube for a moment? Dan Riggin says, great point by Connor Riley. I think that is a great point for sure. I would also say that for a counterexample to what Connor just said, isn't it probably fair to say that Fromm made a big name for himself in the 7-on situation? See, let me see if my memory's correct on this. Wasn't he on the same team as Tate Martell, and didn't he earn the nod over Martell in that opening year, which would have been summer 2016? didn't Fromm make a big name for himself in that 7-on-7 that year, which ultimately was probably pretty prophetic?
I believe, and my memory is just as hazy as yours, if not worse, on this. I believe Martell was rated as the higher-rated prospect going into that camp, and it was understood and given, there are some character issues with Tate Martell and sort of how he handles things, that he was going to be the guy, the starter for his Elite 11 team, his 7-on-7 team. And Fromm just went and just completely outplayed him.
And basically became the starter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's neither here nor there, but it's just my sort of hazy memory of something that may have happened. Enrique Murillo says about Dwan Mathis. I mean, I think the issue for Mathis is that coming back, I think there was a chance that Mathis might have redshirted anyway, just because of the fact that Bennett is a little bit more experienced. We've heard Kirby talk up Stetson Bennett a couple of times here recently. I think that Mathis was potentially heading for a redshirt as it was. And I think now the health concern maybe makes that a little bit easier to kind of usher in. And I wouldn't discount the value of a lot of watching. I mean, one of the things I noticed back during spring practice was the way that, especially late in the spring, I noticed Ryan Trouble Davis and Tresman Marshall being there watching the linebackers a bit more. And because they were both, recovering from injuries, very different injuries than the health scare that Dwan Mathis had, but nonetheless in a position where they had to watch as opposed to participating. And I'm guessing that there is some value in watching practice in addition to watching games. I'm guessing you have a real chance to learn. And, unfortunately, we don't have as much of that in college football anymore. We don't have a lot of watching that goes on. But it wasn't that long ago that most of the players that had real success in college football at the quarterback position had at least watched some, even if it was just for 1 year. You had veteran players that had never played, like Alabama quarterback Blake Sims and Alabama quarterback Jake Coker, that had watched for a while and ultimately had big-time success when they had a chance to be on the field. But you also had a string of redshirt freshmen for a while. Think about Jameis Winston at Florida State. Think about Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M. These guys that watched for a year and then really exploded on the scene the next year. Now, I'm not going to try to tell you that Dwan Mathis is Jameis or Johnny Football. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm saying that's like 5 years ago. I mean, or it's less than a decade ago. It wasn't that long ago that there was really thought to be some value in watching for a little bit. And if Mathis gets a chance to do that, he may be better for it down the line. And the quarterback competition at Georgia eventually, which I'll believe include Dwan Mathis, because while I think that Bennett's probably the better overall backup candidate this year, regardless of Mathis' health situation, I think that Mathis has the better overall chance to become a future SEC starter. And if you think about what a future Georgia quarterback competition could look like, if it's Beck versus Dwan Mathis, if you want to fast forward a year after that, and the fast-rising, very impressive Caleb Williams potentially becomes a part of that conversation where he to choose Georgia when he ultimately makes his college football decision, the quarterback competition at Georgia post Jake Fromm could actually get pretty interesting pretty fast. What else? Yeah, somehow this charger just doesn't work. I don't know what to tell you. I've had all kinds of computer problems this week. So GB2 says, why has nothing been posted about Eason? Are they trying to keep him a secret for the upcoming season? I hope he's in New York ahead of Fields. I won't touch that last part one way or another. But when you say nothing being posted about Eason, are you saying that the Seattle media is not covering this? My guess is this is just the difference in the two regions. I don't know that people in the Pacific Northwest are thinking about Washington football right now the way that we think about SEC football 12 months out of the year. I bet you, and I bet you this is true, I bet you there are more conversations held on a typical day in the state of Georgia about Jacob Eason than there are in the state of Washington.
I actually have an answer for this. The reason we don't hear much about Jacob Eason is because Chris Peterson is notoriously tight-lipped. He does not allow a lot of media access. People hate it when beat writers complain about it, but they complain about it pretty frequently up in Seattle about the lack of access that Washington has. Even, 2 or 3 years ago, ESPN made a whole big thing about, not getting access to coaches and coordinators and players during the course of the week when they have broadcast rights. So part of the reason you don't hear a lot on Eason is just because, Washington does not talk about themselves a lot or allow a lot to be made of them. I do know he has not officially been named the starter, but all indications seem to point to that he will be that guy.
Because they had a couple of those transfers, much the same way a lot of schools have had, right? Some of those signees bolted after spring practice. So that's typically a sign of something. So here would be my question about Jacob Eason. So for his freshman year in Georgia, in 370 pass attempts, which is not necessarily a small sample size, he only completed 55.1% of his passes for a 6.6 yards per attempt number. Those are very low numbers. No disrespect to Eason. Playing as a freshman's tough, but those are really low numbers. There are some people that tell you that accuracy is a really hard thing to improve. Do you think Connor, and Peterson's a really good coach, and that's a really good coaching staff in place there at the University of Washington. Do you think that Washington, with a little bit more of a quick hit offense, frankly, a little bit more softer defenses in the Pac-12, do you think they're going to turn Jacob Eason this season into a 60-something% passer?
60-something, yes. I think it's a lot closer to like 62 than I do 67 where Jake Fromm lives. Yeah. But I do think Eason is going to be better just because he's now had time to acclimate a little bit more to the college game. And I know people might say, oh, well, the Pac-12 is not as tough as the SEC. He'll have that. Eason was taking scout team reps against a defensive backfield that had 3 guys drafted in the first 3 rounds for Washington this year. So he got a lot of practice against elite defensive backs. And, we saw Jake Fromm get a lot better from year 1 to year 2 and sort of the stuff he was able to do. So I do like to believe that Eason would follow a similar progression. How much better is he than his freshman year at Georgia? I don't know until we actually see him hit the field just because it's been so long. But I like to think that Eason would have had pretty similar success that Jake Fromm had that sophomore 2017 season.
We're going to talk about a different topic in a moment, but I will say this to kind of wrap this up. I won't make any apologies for this whatsoever. If Washington's on TV this year, I'm glued to the screen. If Ohio State's on TV this year, I'm glued to the screen. For better or for worse, I am fascinated about what these former Georgia quarterbacks go in and do at their new schools. I'm not going to talk about it a ton on DawgNation Daily because I believe y'all want to talk about this team here, and I totally understand that. But from a fan standpoint, from a curiosity standpoint, I don't normally stay up for what they call Pac-12 After Dark a whole lot, but if it's 10:30 p.m. and Washington's kicking off against Oregon State or something like that, I'm reckoning I'm probably going to be watching some of that. Before I take more comments, let me remind you, by now you know this, but we're doing the R.S. Andrews cool down here, air, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews plays all those positions. I talk a bunch about the air conditioning systems because I don't like to be hot, but that's not the only thing R.S. Andrews can do for you. If your water heater goes out, something along those lines, that can be kind of a panic situation, but listen, R.S. Andrews delivers let me try that one more time. We'll edit this out. R.S. Andrews delivers smiles. And story after story, they've proven that. And they can deliver a smile for you, too. But you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. All right. Back to more of your comments. Nicole House said, I'd rather be discussing the quarterbacks the Dog's going to be facing this season. Chip Ruffles, though, does say that he's going to be tuned in for those games coming up for sure. Miriam Martin Corbin says, I hope Eason does well this year, class act. And Eason certainly had a very classy exit from UGA for sure. Eric Moody says, today's his wife's 40th birthday. Can Claire get a shout out from Eddie? Eddie the Blind Squirrel says, happy 40th birthday to you, Claire. You don't look a day older than 25. So happy birthday, and thanks so much for being a part of what we're doing here on DawgNation Daily. Nathan Edwards asked a good question. How many people are going to be in Athens on September 21st just to be a part of the environment, even if they don't have tickets? And that's always really one of the hallmarks of these really big games, when you have an extra 10,000 or so folks just in the town. And yeah, my guess is there's a version of that for Georgia Notre Dame. Could you see 10,000 plus non-ticketed people coming into Athens? My guess is that's probably the case. I mean, frankly, a lot of Connor's ne'er-do-well friends probably that's all they're planning on doing. Probably right is hanging out those bars and being in downtown Athens.
We're a little bit older now, and we're planning out. We're trying to plan out the day, and we're a little concerned that downtown Athens is going to be so packed that we might just go either go all expenses, and at our tailgate spot we're going to have the TV and watch the game on the TV. Continue at the tailgate spot. I won't be doing any of this because I will be working.
Sure.
I got to earn my keep.
Right.
Or what they will do is, so they'll tailgate, and then once the tailgating ends, they'll go back to someone's house to actually watch the game with a little bit more comfort.
So here's my question on that topic. And as Connor said, I've been working on college football Saturdays for such a long time that the overall tailgating experience, I'm not quite as I'm not as well versed in that as I used to be. I remember years ago how hard it used to be to watch games on TV from a tailgate. I'm guessing the prevalence of like Apple TV and I'm assuming, enhanced Wi-Fi capabilities has watching a game on TV at a tailgate become easier, because it used to be like putting a man on the moon. I mean, it used to be very, very difficult to get a DirecTV satellite or whatever satellite provider you would go for. And I think it had to be a satellite back then. It used to be very hard to do. Has it gotten easier to watch a game at a tailgate? I'm assuming it has.
Yes, it has gotten much easier. There are a variety of different, outlets or services you could use to get it. And I mean, when I'm walking past Myers Quad or trying to make my way to the stadium, I see at least 7, 8, 9 tailgate setups that have a TV on. So really, if you're smart, you don't even need to bring your own.
You just watch somebody else.
You just need to be friendly and be able to make friends with somebody else, and you sort of crowd around their TV screen.
Yeah, I do a lot of that as well. I usually get to Athens pretty early, and it's kind of funny. As you're walking, if it's a later game, you may be walking through the campus, and there's that string of noon games showing up on the various TVs. And if it's earlier, you're seeing that College Game Day being broadcast in various places. I do think a TV is a must-have for a really good tailgate setup, and it used to just be really hard to do. You had to – is it the southeastern sky that you have to point a satellite towards? It's one of those directions you got to make sure you point it towards. It's just kind of a harder thing to be able to do. Sharonda Taylor says, now you can use cell phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot. Tap your smart TV into that, and boom. Yep. So is a cell phone Wi-Fi hotspot enough to power a stream?
Yes, I wouldn't feel but I wouldn't feel super comfortable about knowing it's going to last the whole game.
Yeah.
But there are, there's a variety of stuff. You have jetpacks now where you essentially have a giant Wi-Fi signal. So it is significantly easier.
Also, here at DawgNation World Headquarters, one of the toys we have kind of a super souped-up version of the internet we can take on the road with us. Mm-hmm. I imagine that would work pretty well for a tailgate.
Yeah.
You could probably tap into that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's a kind of fun thing to think about. What else we got going on? Nager Gang says you can stream your YouTube TV app right into your TV. It's simple and easy. Well, hopefully that's what many people are watching DawgNation Daily on right now. So for those of you checking in on that, we certainly appreciate you doing that. Cliff Payne says he thinks that Chubb and Michelle actually hurt Fromm's development to a certain extent because the coaching staff trusted them but didn't trust him. Cliff, I don't believe that's true, and I'll tell you why. I think that it can be easy to confuse Fromm's overall passing yards and passing attempts in 2017 with what he was actually asked to do. Fromm made some big throws, including his first game. I mean, I was doing this as part of DawgNation Daily yesterday. Trey Hill, who was then a recruit, I did this as part of DN90 yesterday. Trey Hill, who was then a recruit, back when Fromm made his first start against Notre Dame, Trey had kind of predicted that Fromm would make some big throws there that day, and he did. It was a low-scoring game, but you go back and look, they were not afraid to put the ball in Fromm's hand then. Some of those throws he connected on, some of them they didn't. I want to say that he probably had at least one pretty significant drop, but from the get-go, they were putting the game in Fromm's hands at least a little bit. Now, when you got into SEC East competition, they did pull back on that some. I think Georgia knew that it was going to be a pretty big favorite in most of those games. But first play out of the box against Mississippi State, the flea flicker. That's a timing play for a guy making his first SEC start. That's a very easy thing to have blown up. We saw the flea flicker get blown up from time to time, or at least the long play action fake from time to time would get spotted by defenses in the previous coaching era. You can blow that thing up if you catch it in time. And yet it worked like a charm for Georgia against Mississippi State, so much so that Dan Mullen tried to return the favor for Florida a year ago and then obviously blew up in his face like so much else has. But I think you can go back and look in 2017. While Georgia was not running some run and shoot offense, there were no shortages of moments where Georgia put the ball in Fromm's hand. I would say go back and rewatch the Rose Bowl as an example of this. For as many big runs as Sony Michel had, and the all-time great highlight of the wild dog to score the touchdown, for what Nick Chubb did that day as well, he averaged 10 yards a carry, something like that. There were some big throws from Fromm as well, especially to start the second half. So I think that Fromm was developed more in 2017 than you might be giving him credit for. I understand the point that you're making, but I think if you go back and rewatch a lot of those games, you might see more from Jake Fromm than you realize on a play-by-play basis. Not the big numbers, the way that some quarterbacks pile them up, but there were no shortage of moments where Fromm was asked to make a throw for that team in 2017. Enrique Murillo says, I believe our wide receiver core will surprise many of you. They will look to surpass expectations because this is their time to shine. It's time for someone to step and meet the challenge, look for it. Well, they're going to hear a very similar message to that from the Georgia coaching staff. Enrique, you may prove to be right on that. You know, one of the interesting things about SEC Media Days is the way in which guys travel from room to room and they speak to a different group of media types in various rooms. And sometimes they kind of say some different things along the way. I guess an example of that is Jake Fromm, who mentioned some different receivers. I've seen different media outlets reporting on this. And, you know, in the room that I was in with Fromm, he talked about Tyler Simmons. And in a different room, apparently he talked about Matt Landers. And in a different room, I guess at one point in time, he may have even mentioned George Pickens by name. It's just kind of interesting, all the different ways in which guys say slightly different things when it comes to their receivers or any topic. They just say different things in the different rooms for SEC Media Days. But I certainly think that Jake Fromm, based on some of the stuff he's done this summer, goes into the start of summer camp, which will begin next week, at least at the end of next week. I think he goes in feeling pretty good about all of this. So I think it's a pretty interesting comment. Brody Meister says, blackout for Notre Dame. I don't know, y'all. I mean, I was all ready to come in here today and say I don't want one. I don't think Georgia should black out. And I think Connor's going to pop up on the screen here in a moment. I'll ask him about this when he gets here. So I was firmly ready to come on this show today and say, all of you who are calling for a blackout, we need to just not worry about that and let Georgia focus on taking care of the business at hand and, you know, wear the red jerseys, wear the white jerseys, and, you know, bring the black jerseys out for some other time. I was all ready to do that. But then when you get CBS Sports' Brad Nessler coming on here saying that he thinks Georgia ought to wear the black jerseys for Notre Dame, it's kind of hard not to get a little excited about that possibility when he's bringing that up. Now, obviously part of his motivation is he wants the best overall product on TV, and the blackout looks cool on TV when all the fans are participating in it too. You know, Connor, I don't really remember where you've been on this topic in the past. There's a little bit of fan momentum, maybe accentuated by Nessler's comments today for the blackout against Notre Dame. Are you pro or con on that? Fern it or again it?
I'd like to see them wear the black jerseys at some point, but I'm sort of in the same camp as you. More so just because I just know that it's not going to happen. And, you know, as much as I would love to see Georgia come out and do it, I don't think Kirby's going to really want to add any more gasoline to, you know, a pretty flammable situation with this game, because there is a chance if they lose this game, like, he's going to get a ton of blowback from that decision. Because so this morning I wrote about how this Georgia Notre Dame game is essentially the best home game of the decade. As long as Georgia and Notre Dame enter that game undefeated, it will only be the second time this decade that there's been two top 10 teams playing in Sanford Stadium. The last time was 2013 LSU. What are you smirking at?
Memphis Dog says you're doing a blackout right now.
Yeah. Anyway, the 2013 LSU-Georgia game was the last time there were two top 10 teams to play in Athens. That game, though, Georgia was already coming in with a loss, and it was a 3:30 kickoff. The last time there were two top 10 teams to play in Athens in a night game environment was the 2008 blackout game against Alabama.
I was wondering about that, yeah.
That was absolutely disastrous.
It was also the last time that Georgia's national championship chances before the season seemed as realistic as they seem right now. Georgia was the preseason number one in 2008. They didn't survive that. They were knocked off the number one spot after the first week of the season, but they were preseason number one.
You had a junior quarterback who was getting some NFL draft buzz, hyped to be a number one overall pick. You had a running back who had really wowed a lot of people with his athleticism. and was a potential first-round draft pick down the line. You had a lot of young, intriguing defensive options on that team, and I don't think this Georgia team is all that similar to that Georgia team in 2008, but you don't want to draw too many parallels to that game.
All right, so GB2, interesting idea, especially when you think about the new LED lights. He says, what about a red out?
Not a bad idea.
You have to get everybody to participate, and it can't be Hadge wear the same red shirt I always wear. You got to be red. You got to be red, 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 and use the LED lights to make them red too. That might look pretty cool. Can I give you a scorching hot take that literally no one asked for on this topic?
It's your show.
Y'all buckle your seatbelts for this one because this one's excessively hot. If Kirby wore black jerseys against Notre Dame and then Georgia lost, I think that'd put his coaching career in jeopardy at UGA.
It'd be real ugly.
Yeah.
The post-game show that night be real ugly. Monday when we come in and we got to do this show, be real ugly.
I'm not telling you that people would want to fire him because of that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it would certainly damage his brand of being able to say, here's the new era of Georgia football and the new culture that's being built. There would be a lot of people, if that game were to go wrong, that would say, same culture, same old Georgia, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, for one way or another. Like I said, that's a ludicrously hot take.
Yep.
And I would only do that amongst friends here in our R.S. Andrews cool down portion of the program. But I do believe if Georgia were to put those jerseys on for that game, it would have a lot at stake.
Yep.
A lot at stake.
The downside is much greater than the upside. The upside is you look cool while winning, which is great. But if you lose, you get a ton of questions asked about your program. You know how we sort of talk about how on DawgNation we talk about Dan Mullen, or we're pretty sure he's not that great of a coach.
Yeah.
You're going to see that in spades if Georgia were to wear black and lose to Notre Dame.
Oh, it'd be awful. Petey Wheatstraw on the subject of Kirby Smart says let me get this because this is a good comment. He says if he doesn't care for the black jerseys, why even bother wearing them against cupcake teams or even using them to help you with recruiting? I think that's an interesting comment from Petey, and here's what I'll tell you, Petey. And I know that a lot of people maybe that don't care about college football as much as we do may roll their eyes about this. I think this has become a hot enough topic, or at least generated enough curiosity over the last couple of years for why Georgia hasn't been wearing them, why all the recruits always wear them. Georgia showed off its black jerseys on Twitter the other day, I want to say, with the 150th year of college football patch on them. So they have them to be worn. They have the patch that the rest of the jerseys also have. I think this is a hot enough topic now where I think that Kirby Smart should have to address this topic again. And I realize that if he happens
he'll absolutely be asked about it the week of the game.
I wonder if he gets asked about it next week.
Could certainly. I don't know about that.
I'm not asking him because I don't want to get yelled out of the room. But,
I think there are a lot of other questions that need to get answered before we get to that. But I'd put pretty decent. You know what? And granted, someone say, "Oh, it's not a fair bet. You control this." $100 bet that at some point between now and 8 p.m. on September 21st, Kirby gets asked about black jerseys and the possibility of wearing them for Notre Dame.
But if you want to ask him about this, and I think Petey's point on this is a really good one. I think Kirby's thoughts on this, he probably should clarify it a little bit more. If you want to ask him, I don't think you can ask him the week of the game because the week of the game, he's going to
that decision's already made.
It's already made, but he's also kind of extra intense. He's maybe anticipating the question coming, and therefore he's got the Heisman pose ready to give to you on it. I think if you want to get a more candid answer, I think you got to sneak it in when he doesn't expect it.
Probably, yeah. Catch him off guard a little bit, but I still, he's gonna. I feel pretty comfortable saying he's gonna get asked about it at some point.
And I'll restate my belief on this. I don't think wearing the jerseys causes you to win. I don't think that wearing the jerseys causes you to lose. My only interest in this is because I do think they look kind of cool, and many of you want to see Georgia wear them. And there's also a huge pocket that kind of doesn't want to see Georgia wear them. If it's a vote, I'm gonna vote for the red. I'm gonna vote for the red jersey for that game and every home game. But a lot of Georgia fans feel the opposite way. So I'm sort of fascinated with this because it's something that some fans are interested in. I don't personally believe that it leads to a win or leads to a loss. And frankly, I don't know any Georgia fan that feels that way. I don't think there's a single fan that thinks Georgia beat Auburn in 2007 because of black jerseys, nor do I think a fan thinks Georgia lost to Alabama in 2008 because of wearing black jerseys. I just think it made the win that night more cool in 2007. And I think it made the loss much more embarrassing in 2008 than otherwise would have been. There's just an extra emotional response to the outcome, whatever it is, when an alternate uniform gets worn.
I think that I absolutely do believe there are fans out there who are crazy enough to believe Georgia beat Auburn because they wore a black jersey and Georgia lost to Alabama because they wore a black jersey.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard that argument made.
Oh, I definitely think those people exist. I'm sure there's some deep fake out there that's tweeting about it right now. But again, with this black jersey thing, and Cliff Payne's brought up that, Georgia fans are so in their own head on this. They are, and it's the reality of the situation because on the one hand, I actually do think they look great, and I would, in all likelihood, like to see them once a year. But just because of the history that's associated with them, and, college football is a tradition. It's a sport more so than any other sport that is based on tradition, and that is sort of a break from tradition, that I just think it's so divisive that it's always going to be an issue until it's either Kirby just comes out and says, we're never wearing these again, we're only showing you them to recruits, or he says one game and I believe he had said in the past he was going to try and wear them one game a year.
But they haven't done it since then.
Yeah, he hasn't done it since then. So
Miriam Martin Corbin says, what about bringing back the real silver breeches? I'd be way more excited about that. If they brought back those metallic, shiny, sheen silver breeches, the Dallas Cowboys wear those daggum things now. The NFL uniforms are also made by Nike. So the technology exists. I'd be more excited about that. I wonder if the fans, though, would notice. I wonder if Georgia came out that night. Let's say they, much like the 2007 blackout, they warmed up in those bland gray things, and they went back to the locker room, and they came out wearing shiny silver breeches, homage to the 1980 year. Would fans get into that? Oh, what if this? Miriam may be onto something here. Did you know that Arkansas is bringing back block numbers? I think South Carolina may be doing some of this too. Block numbers I think of as kind of an 80s style. What if Georgia wore the 1980 uniform that night? No blackout, but we're wearing the 1980 uniform. No one would say that's a motivational ploy. It just looks cool. It's not even that different of a uniform. It just looks cool. It's shiny silver breeches, block numbers, tearaway jerseys. Or they can even put the stars back on the back of the helmet again for one night only. Herschel Walker already let it be known he's planning on being in the building. I bet he was probably supposed to keep that a secret. That feels like the kind of thing he was probably supposed to keep a secret, but he did tell us that last week. Would you be okay with a throwback jersey uniform for Georgia for that game?
Not really. I know.
You're the worst.
I mean, well, I can't be, I don't think I can be, not wanting to really see a black jersey and then say I want to see a throwback jersey, because to me it's the same thing. It's an alternate jersey, and it's an attempt to bring extra attention as opposed to just coming out there in the stuff they wear every day.
And for what it's worth, by the way, Notre Dame's got its own deal with all this kind of stuff because they do the green jersey thing all the time, and they do hype videos for green jersey.
Not all the time, but on special occasions they do it.
And I'm guessing their record in the green jersey is probably not great.
I feel like I can look this up.
So they do that from time to time. Philip Jordan Wells says that if you bring back the silver breeches, you got to bring back the red ones too. And Philip, I've said this before. I'd be fine with the red breeches if y'all would just be content with wearing them for the road games. But I feel like this is like a slippery slope, where once the red pants are back in the rotation, then pretty soon it's going to be silver helmets and, black jerseys and red pants. I just feel like this is kind of like that old story of this is why we can't have nice things. The moment Georgia adds another alternative combination into the mix, it's going to be 2 seconds later, and Georgia looks like Maryland out there on the field. All right, we're going to get ready to go here.
Notre Dame is 8-6 all time, or since the end of the Dan Devine era.
8-6.
8-6. They've won them 14 times.
By the way, Gregory Novak says the early 80s football pants were also gray. I didn't know that. I thought they were more shiny silver back then. I apologize for that. Dustin Williams says red pants, white jersey versus the Gators. Listen, you go back and look at some of those 80s era stuff where they did have the red pants on the road. I will admit they did look good. I will say the red pants does look good with the white jersey. I do think that. Mike Anderson says, let's just win the national championship this year. Focus, folks. I mean, I'm all for having fun with these kind of conversations, but I do think there is a point that could be made based on Mike's comment there that maybe Georgia, of all teams, with its do more mantra in place, maybe it just needs to just focus on going out and mauling people this year.
Yeah.
I
mean, there's a pretty large section of the fan base that I would say, and we sort of saw this with the fan day pushback, that is just so tightly wound about just winning a national championship that it's hard for them to sort of focus on the more fun and frivolous aspects of college football.
I think if the 2008 game against Alabama hadn't happened, I bet you Georgia wears the black jerseys twice a season.
I don't know about twice, but I would almost certainly say at least once a season.
They're nowhere near the special occasion they are now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's probably true. Let me do this real quick. All right.
Wait, by the way, last week, did you address the Herschel Walker VHS tapes thing that was circulating around on Twitter?
No, I did not. What Connor's referencing is Ryan Fowler, who's been a guest on our show before, goes on. He's an Alabama guy. Goes on some show somewhere and was talking about basically taking a shot at Georgia fans for how long it's been since Georgia won a national championship. It's all the kind of stuff that we've all heard a million times. I do think it's funny to know just how much a lot of these Alabama folks are thinking about Georgia. But no, that didn't rise to the level of being DawgNation Daily content.
You're probably right. It shouldn't. I would just say I think it's pretty funny that Alabama fans think people can still watch stuff on VHS tapes. Right. You can find it on the
internet. As if YouTube doesn't exist. It will be a very satisfying experience. A very satisfying experience when Georgia vanquishes Nick Saban. Because here's what I believe. I believe the entirety of the SEC has a real opportunity. I talked about this yesterday. Steve Spurrier said he thinks if Saban loses 3 games in a year, then loses 3 games in the following year, he's going to quit. I firmly believe the first time Nick Saban doesn't make the college football playoff,
he's done.
That's his last year. I don't think that Nick Saban has any stomach whatsoever for being an off-season coach at Alabama who didn't get his team in the playoff. And I think that's especially true now in his more advanced age. I think that Georgia or LSU or maybe a combination of a few SEC teams, for all the torment that Nick Saban's provided them, I believe the right confluence of events could send him to Lake Burton for good.
So let's just pitch this hypothetical a bit farther. Alabama's quarterback situation after this year with Tua leaving is, say, pretty murky. Let's say Georgia beats Alabama in the SEC championship game. Alabama misses the playoff. I don't know if that's the convolution of events that would need to happen for Saban to hang it up. But let's say, Tua gets hurt this year or things don't go well at Alabama. They lose to Texas A&M. Somehow they find a way to lose to LSU. And they, stumble through there. And that team misses the playoff. And I think if that team misses the playoff, there's a real good chance they just don't care at all to play in the Sugar Bowl or the Peach Bowl, whatever upper tier bowl game they end up getting in.
Because remember, this is Alabama. If this is professional sports, they would have traded all their prospects for veteran players. This is trading every one of your minor league all-stars for, some closer that can come in and, hopefully get you 10 saves in the month of September. I mean, that's the college football version is what Alabama's trying to do right now. If that doesn't work, what else can you try?
Yep.
I mean, he's recycled his assistant coach now 2 years in a row.
Yep.
What else is there left to do? The only thing would be if there's some very high-profile quarterback that emerges on the transfer market. That might be the one thing that could get him to consider. But I don't think he's got any interest whatsoever in hearing the complaints. And I said this yesterday. It's the one thing that virtually all SEC coaches have kind of had in common. Far different guys like Spurrier and Saban. You can put Richt in this. You can put a number of coaches into this. they all eventually got tired of the unrealistic expectations that exist by the fan bases. Mm-hmm. And listen, virtually every SEC school is the same on this, and eventually the response from all the coaches is eventually the same too. They don't want it. Mm-hmm. They don't want to listen to it, and I don't think Saban, who has a choice when to walk away, I don't think he would willingly choose to stick around and hear more of that.
Right. Saban is the most accomplished college football coach in the history of the sport. Now, obviously, he couldn't get done at the NFL level. He's no Bill Belichick. But, he's got nothing left to prove at the college level. So, while I don't think he's wired to just sort of walk away after one loss or missing the playoff, you do wonder, why does he have to – what keeps him going when he's already accomplished just about more than anything any other college coach has done?
Yeah, it would be a difficult level of motivation. At this point in time, I don't think he can go back to the NFL. I think the NFL's become such a young man's game now. You've got, barely 40-year-old Cliff Kingsbury who's, coaching the Cardinals. It seemed to become an offensive-minded person sport, whereas Saban's more of the defensive-minded guy. I think he would get NFL offers if he wanted to go coach. I think somebody would do that. But at this point in time, it may just be time for him to say, I'm no longer going to coach anymore. Let me finish up over here on YouTube. Dapper Dan, the topic came up earlier about the possibility that George Pickens could be a 1,000-yard receiver. Dapper Dan says, I think Fromm's too good of a quarterback for Pickens to get 1,000. He's not going to be focused on one guy. He will always find the best option and spread it around to whomever. The tight ends will get more as well the running backs as well. Fromm was probably a little bit better at spreading the ball around a year ago than he was in 2017, where he did focus a lot near the end of the year on Javon Wims. Certainly, Fromm was targeting J.J. Holloman pretty heavily during the G-Day game to mixed results, which obviously leads to some curiosity about how that'll work this season with that target not available to him anymore. But the best of Georgia is going to be found by spreading the ball around. Use that big offensive line to your advantage. They could give Fromm 3, 4, 5 seconds to throw the football. If they do, then that gives you a chance to choose your best overall option. Now, I'd love to see some really big numbers from an individual receiver. I think it's a possibility for somebody. I think that Pickens is a candidate for that. But, from surveying the field and making choices from a variety of opportunities, that is something in his junior season that I hope we do get a chance to see Jake Fromm do a good bit.
I agree.
All right. Any final thoughts from anybody else here? Connor, anything from you?
Nope.
Let me invite you to go to ajc.com to get your Atlanta news now. There are a lot of interesting things going on in the state of Georgia right now. I won't get too much more in detail than that. But a lot of very, very controversial, weird stuff going on. The AJC has had coverage of every twist and turn of all those stories, and I'd be lying if I told you that I wasn't fascinated by where some of this stuff's going to go next. So you can check in and keep up with all that at the AJC, ajc.com, throughout the day. Anytime something big happens, somebody mentioned the Mueller stuff a little earlier. Obviously, there's big coverage of all that. There's even some Georgia connections to some of this kind of stuff as well. The AJC's reporting on that. It's Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. Also, huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. They play all those positions for us here around DawgNation. They can do the same thing for you, as I've said before, story after story. Dari and the whole gang over there at R.S. Andrews, they deliver smiles. Let them put a smile on your face as well. I'll see you this afternoon at 3 p.m. for Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, and then back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily Live. We have a special guest in tomorrow's show who's going to explain to us why he thinks DeAndre Swift has a very good chance of winning the Heisman Trophy this upcoming season. So that's all on the way tomorrow. We'll see you then for DawgNation Daily. Y'all have a great day, everybody.